Well then, welcome to Thursday night's Sunday school lesson. Pastor Lyons here. Glad y'all all here. Everybody that's on and anybody that will come on, glad y'all here with us. We got a pretty good message tonight. It's called Jesus Prevents Two Stonings. The devotional reading comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. And the printed passage is John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11 and 56 through 59. And before we start, Pastor Stevens, could you pray us in?
Father God, we come this evening just to tell you thank you. Father, as you awaken us this morning, we start our daily journey. You didn't allow any hurt, harm, or danger to come upon us. Father God, you bless us with a reasonable portion of health and strength, and we went that through our daily activities. Oh, Father God, you shielded us from seen and unseen dangers. You protected us from the spirits of this world. You protected us with your Holy Spirit leading, guiding, and directing us. And Father God, we thank you for allowing us to come to another service of yours, Father God, to learn your word through Sunday church school. Oh, Father God, we pray now that you open up our minds of understanding, open up our ears of hearing, and open up our eyes of seeing. Oh, Father God, we ask you to bless the sick and the afflicted over your land and country. Oh, Father God, there's still some heads that bow down with grief and their hearts are torn. But, Father God, we know that you are a heart fixer. We know that you are a mind regulator. Father, we know that you are a friend in the midnight hour. But, Father God, we ask you to encourage our hearts to hold on just a little while longer, knowing that serving you will pay off after a while. Father God, we ask you to bless this service. Let me please it in our sight. And Father, we ask you to bless the ones that are on the line. We ask you to bless the ones that had a desire to come, was not able to. And Father, we just even ask you to bless the unconcerned. And Father God, we ask you to keep us, guide and direct us. Your Son Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. As I said, tonight's title is Jesus Prevents Two Stonings. Our devotional reading is Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 5. And the printed passage in what we will read is John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11 and 56 through 59. Would anybody like to read? John chapter 8, 1 through 11, and then 56 through 59.
Okay. It says, Jesus went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again unto the temple, and all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, taken in adultery, the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground, and he heard them not. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground, and they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman was standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thy accused? Had no man condemned thee? She said, No man. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. And 56 and 59. Okay, 56 and 59. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Then said the Jews unto him, Thou art now yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham? Jesus said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. Then took back a stone to cast at him. But Jesus hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Amen.
Amen. So let's start rocking and rolling. When we start off in verse 1 in John chapter 8, it says simply, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus went to the Mount of Olives because, one, everybody else went home to rest, and that's where Jesus went to rest. He had been teaching all day, and he went to rest. So in verse 2 it says, at dawn he appeared to get in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down and teach them. Jesus had woke up and he went where and did what he normally does. Jesus was about the Lord's business as usual. And he was at the temple courts teaching, and there were many people gathered around to learn. But understand at this time there was also some doubters in the midst and so-called law keepers who wanted to always prove Jesus wrong. Do not think that Jesus always had a crowd that was there for good intentions. If you recall, the religious, not disciples, but the religious groups wanted Jesus to leave. They wanted him to go. Jesus was saying things that they didn't like. And this should help you see what will be coming in the passages more clearly. But remember that Jesus offered something that the religious groups could not. That was one of the problems they were having. Jesus was teaching and telling things that they couldn't do. And Jesus said in one of his statements in the previous chapter that he was going to quench their thirst if they wanted it. Anybody want to turn to John chapter 7 verses 37 and 38?
John, what now?
Chapter 7 verses 37 and 38.
John chapter 7, verse 37.
And 38. Yep.
In the last days, that great day of the feast, Jesus stood and cried, saying, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believeth on me, as the scripture hath said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water.
You mean to tell me I'm a keeper of the law and I'm this so-called leader, and he says something like this, and he has spoken this, and now we can see why the religious group wanted him gone, because they could not offer this. They could not teach like he was teaching. Neither did they have authority like he did when he taught. And why the others were at the temple, because they wanted to drink. They wanted to know. And they wanted the living water. So when you get to verse 3, it says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees. And before I even get into the verse, right now you see the so-called followers, the so-called, how can I put, Christians, if I can put it that way. Look at what they're doing in this verse. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. And I'm going to keep verse 4 with it too. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. First and foremost, if you're looking at verse 3, you see they bringing somebody. They're bringing her. Not of her free will, but they're bringing her. Where the other party at? So now we have verse 3 and we have verse 4. And here comes the mighty, and I'll call them unknowledgeable and stuck in traditional ways of old teachers of the law and the Pharisees. And please don't forget that they taught to benefit themselves. And now we will take some time with this verse, because they brought a woman caught in sin. You know, adultery is only one person. So they brought this woman caught in sin. It didn't tell you if the woman was the married one or the man was the married one. So where was the man at? He was caught in sin because someone was married in this deal. And someone had knowledge of it. So where was the other party? If you really want to say that this woman was caught in adultery, then who did she do it with? Who was watching this even in order for them to be caught? Because somebody had to witness this even. Because obviously the man that was doing it, he ain't told on himself. So who was watching this? And then you start looking at the devious side of man. Because you should be asking yourself, so was this a setup? And who are they to pass judgment? Anybody want to read Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 4?
Matthew chapter 7, 1 through 4.
Yes, ma'am.
It said, judge not, that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged.
Uh-oh.
What measure yet met, it shall be measured to you again.
Uh-oh.
And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye?
Uh-oh.
Consider not the beam that is in thy own eye.
Uh-uh.
How wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thy eye, and behold, a beam is in thy own eye.
Uh-oh. Which one of y'all perfect? Look at their judgment, even because it is not righteous judgment. Look at it. None of us has a true righteous judgment, but look at this situation. They don't have a righteous judgment because they've had a favorite in the situation. They didn't bring the man. The man may have been a friend or whatever. He was not brought about. So how can the unrighteous judge anyone? Anybody want to read Acts 17 and 31? Because I'm going to tell you who can do it. Go ahead.
This here, as I say every week, this here is just like it ain't the point that all of them caught this woman adultery. It's just the point of if somebody will tell us something and we'll run with it. And then sooner or later that word get around, you got a crowd. Here comes a crowd of people here standing before Jesus with this woman. Well, and here they go saying, well, we go up by the law of Moses. So we gonna stone this woman. Well, you can't go by the law of Moses because just like you said, where a man at? In order for them to go by the law, they have to also bring the man because it's gotta be both of them there. If they want. But all they was trying to do was show Jesus up. Just like these lessons that we've been had in the past. Everybody wanted to show Jesus up. Everybody wanted to make Jesus look bad. But these folks here, they are no different than us. Because just like this right here. Take for instance, you got people that may be in the church, finna get a divorce or something. Well, instead of us helping those people, which we're supposed to do, we'll talk about it, man, and scare. Even, take for example, a young lady in her teens that gets pregnant. Well, we'll talk about that lady. We'll talk about that young girl. Instead, we need to be there to help. So, we as people, we are bad about judging people. I love what you said about Matthew 7 and 1 through 4. You know what I'm saying? job is to please God and what we do. And this woman here, oh man, yes, she was wrong. But the man that she was with, he was wrong also. Huh? There's a saying that says this right here. And I heard a preacher go, when a woman lay down with that man, and that man, and that man, when she get up, they label, society has her labeled. Now this is society labels her as a whore. But when that man lay down with this woman, and lay down with that woman, and lay down with that woman, society labels him, said when he get up and put his pants on, he's still a man. But one thing about it is, adultery is adultery, and adultery is sin. And that's what we say, it's sin. But look at here, who all really good? I'm through, bro.
Amen.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's 2 points to this. First of all, I heard what Tim said, and I heard what you said. But if you read the scriptures, it said, and the scribe, did not say the scribe and the Pharisees brought this woman to Jesus. It wasn't the people that they was looking at that had judgment. They was looking at the readers of the law. They was looking at the Pharisees and the scribes bringing her. Me and you could have brought her with nothing been said. Jeff could have brought her. Nothing would have been said. Any ordinary person would have brought him Jesus with nothing had been said. But these are the interpreters, these are the readers, these are the adjusters of the law. And one thing they fail to realize, and we fail to realize, in the law of Moses, it talks about adultery. If a man shall put his wife away, he shall give her a right of divorcement. But it still says they still shall be married until one dies. Unless, even though they might get a right of divorcement, she is still known as his wife. If any man takes her again to be his wife, even though she has not had the right of divorcement, she is known as an adulterer. That means if he divorced her, if that man divorced her, and she never married again, if he divorced her and he didn't die, she'd be known as an adulteress the rest of her life until he dies. So that is one instance of her being an adulteress because she never married again, and her first husband was still alive. And that if any man goes unto a marriage, and if any man takes her as his wife, and even though her first husband is still alive, she's the one known as adulteress, not him. Read the law. And then it states those 2 incidents. It wasn't the people that brought her to Jesus. It was the scribes and Pharisees. That's why they so hard on hate. These guys, they got it down pat. They know everything, like Jill said. They got it down pat, but they refuse to see that they still have beams in their own lives.
And
how can an unrighteous judge judge unrighteousness? He said, if your eye is dark, you are full of sin. But if your eye is light, you have Christ in you. That's it.
so, as y'all heard both, understand, when they talk about Moses' law, they talk about the Old Testament, because Jesus is going to show you something about the New Testament.
Yes, sir.
Because they still dealing in the past, and Jesus is like, I got something for you. So, somebody want to pull up Acts 17 and 31?
Because he has appointed a day in which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he has ordained, whereof he has given assurance unto all men, and that he has raised him from the dead.
So just knowing that passage, you know that those men that brought the woman to him ain't got no say so. They ain't got no say so. They wrong. None of these men could be the righteous judge, and the Lord was going to give them proof in the resurrection. But also think about the sins that they were committing themselves. See, I can see her actions, but we can't see ours from the plotting that they did, because they had to go to get her. To the bringing of the woman in hostility, to simple fact that they announced someone else's sins. I'm going to go tell everybody. And they did not even speak to their own. Did you not witness this? How are you going to testify? And Jesus is going to get them about this in a minute. And please don't leave out the favoritism and the double standard, and then the mindset to bring her to Christ to test him. You weren't bringing him to Christ because of what she truly did. You really were bringing her to test him. They had no prayers for the woman. They didn't show any love to the fallen woman, and all that they could do was condemn the woman as the law would. And they wanted the worst for this child of God. Look at these ones that are supposed to be showing them who God is. And all they want is the worst for the woman. We bringing her to be tested and stoned. I could be bringing her to get some mercy. I could be bringing her to be healed. I could be bringing her to be prayed for. We could be bringing her to love on the sister, but we bringing her to be stoned. Us children of God. So-called. It never said if she was a believer or a non-believer. But I'll tell you something, she was the same as all of us with sin and whom Jesus found worth dying for. And if he found her worth dying for, why do you find her worth destroying? See, they talk like they have ways of Christ, but their actions alone look to destroy a sheep that may need to be found. And nowhere do you see them marked by love in this situation. You see them marked by their pride and their arrogance, but Jesus' people are marked by pride and arrogance. See, these bullies did this also in my mind without the woman's consent. Because she wasn't walking willingly. You pulled her to this situation. Or as we might say, they yoked her up and brought her against her will and pretty much dragged her to Jesus. All of this, if you pay attention to it, was suspicious. And maybe these so-called leaders were truly in cahoots on the other side. You know, they in disguise. So she is standing before the group of judges. And that's what I'm calling these men, because that's what they think they are. And who have walked her up to Jesus to address her sins. How you going to walk me up to Jesus to address my sins when you ain't walked yourself up to address your own? And they have a ton of sins themselves. I can't take you up to Jesus for your sins because I'm too busy trying to get mine together. So they go up and they have a ton of sins themselves that should have been addressed. If you want to talk about sins, talk about your own. While they were trying to broadcast someone else's faults. That's one of the problems we have now. Too busy talking about folk instead of praying for folk. So they tell Jesus of the woman's faults. They tell him. They pronounce the woman. They say she's an adulteress. And her ways. They talk about her character, as they said. And they do it in a way to give respect on the down low, as they called him teacher. With all cunning, malice in their minds and hearts. See, their actions and hearts were not right. They actually made the announcement of what the sin was to Jesus instead of even letting Jesus see if she wanted to confess to him in this predicament. And I call it a predicament because it wasn't a predicament for the woman. It was actually a predicament for those leaders. Why can you confess her sins and not yours? Because I know if I'm Jesus, I'm looking at them like fools. So, and Jesus gets at him. So, in verse 5 it says, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. Now what do you say? Uh-oh. You must not know I'm greater than Moses.
All right.
Don't question me about the law of Moses. I am the word. I am the law. These men were right about adultery being a stonable offense, as Pastor Stephen said. It was. But Moses is gone. The law is done. But they were going to need some more stones for the one that they left out. This was a Jewish law, but if they saw the act and observed the act, then they had to bring the other party forward, because word of mouth was not going to get it. Understand that even in that Jewish law, you had to bring forth some witnesses. And you look at the intelligence of Jesus, because he's going to clown them with this. Even our judicial system is based on true evidence and not word of mouth. You got to have some witnesses, or we throw the case out. So what happens? They start quoting the law and punishment to Jesus just for one part of the party. And then they ask Jesus, so what you think? Well, first of all, y'all passed all the judgment when you brought her to me, told me what she did, and told me what happens to her. So you already passed the judgment. You brought the one at fault, and then you have the nerve to ask the teacher what he thought. See, if you really was asking the teacher, you would have said, teacher, here's the situation. You wouldn't have told him the situation and the verdict and the outcome. They did all this backwards, and nowhere in their process was there any type of love or forgiveness.
No compassion either.
No compassion. They were being deceitful with their actions. And on top of all of this, these men broke up a teaching, because Jesus was teaching at the time.
Come on, preacher.
You mean to tell me you interfered with the word to try to get over on Jesus? Woo, you might want to talk about adultery. You might want to talk about your sin.
I know that's right.
You was trying to break up a teaching that was going on to bring harm and shame to someone that Jesus came to die for? The funny thing is that they were looking for the judge and executioner, and that was not Jesus' job at that time. Since y'all know the law, since y'all know all the information, you didn't know that. Anybody want to read John 3:17 and 18?
After y'all favorite verse.
3:17 and 18.
Yeah.
God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He that believeth on him is not condemned, but he that believeth not is condemned, already because he hath not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God.
So you mean that she ain't part of the world? So if she part of the world, she got a chance of being saved. But not with these men. Not with these men. And like I said, it never said if she was a believer or not, but she has a chance to believe if you let her see God's work. And guess what? You so-called hypocrites ain't showing her God's work. So now you bring her to Jesus, and guess what? Jesus is going to show her. But before I jump there, so since Jesus ain't the judge right now, Jesus stays true to the word. Jesus didn't judge. He says they were using this question as a trap in order to have basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger.
Right, all right.
See, this makes me think of that sermon I wrote, Writing in the Dirt. The main part was the forgiveness. See, they were truly looking to accuse Jesus here, the teacher, the one we brought her to. And the woman was going to be used to trip him up, or so they thought. Scapegoat.
Yep.
How can they bring a sinner to Christ and ignore their own sins? So I'll give them some credit, because guess what? They brought a sinner to the one who could wash the sins away. So what you do, don't think you're going to mess up God's game. But don't be fooled, he sees you too. So Jesus steps down in that ground and starts writing with his finger. If you look at Isaiah 64 and 6, because you brought the sinner to the one that could wash her. Isaiah 64 and 6 says, but we are all as an unclean thing, and all our righteousness. Let me repeat this. All our righteousness are as filthy rags, and we all do fade as a leaf, and our iniquities, like the wind, have taken us away. So the question I would raise is, how does a filthy rag say that another filthy rag is worse? Or that they are filthy if they are not themselves? See, they came to the one that will be the true judge in judgment. And they had a judgment mindset about it, with the alternative motive of trapping Jesus. But look at Jesus, because he did something that I learned as a camp counselor when I used to work with kids. And that was, he got to where the lady was. He got down to make the lady feel comfortable. One of the things we learned as a camp counselor was to get at a kid's level to make them feel comfortable, so they will talk. Meet them where they at. There you go. And ain't that what Jesus always did? He didn't stay in a place. He went to where it was. And where it was here was in a low, humble place. Jesus went down. And he simply placed himself at the low position, and he placed himself in a friendlier and more comforting position for the accused. Because these men had already gave her the blues. They passed judgment and everything. See, this made them feel like they were not in so much trouble when I used to do it, and allowed them to speak to us comfortably. And Jesus eases this woman. And Jesus simply writes on the ground, and it does not say what he wrote, but it moved the attention away from the situation. See, we might have been looking to see what Jesus wrote, but what Jesus really did was he moved the attention away from the situation, because he was now in a lowly position and writing on the ground, and we are no longer thinking of the woman. We're trying to figure out, what is Jesus doing? But we are looking at what is he doing, as I said. And look at Jesus doing something so simple as writing in the dirt.
Yeah.
You know, we all be like, why is he playing in the dirt? We got this serious situation to us, and what does Jesus do? He starts writing in the dirt. But see, this is a foolish thing to us. Is it not? If somebody was yelling at you and they bent down and started writing in the dirt, you say, what's wrong with you? You're just foolish.
Your ways are not my ways.
Yeah, but watch the Lord. Anybody want to pull up 1 Corinthians 1 and 27? Yep, that's right. Say it.
But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise.
Mhm.
And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty.
Uh-oh. You mean Jesus just got down in the dirt and started writing? What is going on? Maybe Jesus is shaming the so-called wise. Maybe he is letting them see something that they don't know to look at. Because then it says in 7, they must have got annoyed because when they kept on questioning him about it, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." See, now, Jesus is saying, okay, let me play with the law if you want to play with the law. Because look at these, and I'm going to just call them what they are, persistent doers of iniquity. They ain't gave up. They still trying to put Jesus in a bond, trying to trap him. They still pushing this woman to trip him up. And Jesus is doing something that we would probably say is simple, easy, and foolish. But boy, is he messing them up. Because it says Jesus stood up again and looked them right in their eyes. Hey, I'm going to stand up. They are sinning just by being persistent and doing wrong. And Jesus had taken some of the attention away from the woman, but the unrighteous judges kept persisting because they were looking for the trap to catch Jesus. So here goes Jesus. Well, now Jesus responds to their questioning with a question statement. He does say, where the witnesses are at, as is stated, cast the first stone. But see, Jesus knows this law of Moses. Because in Deuteronomy 17:6-7 it says, on the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, a person is to be put to death. But no one is to be put to death on the testimony of only one witness. The hands of the witnesses must be the first in putting that person to death. And then the hands of all the people. You must purge the evil from among you. So Jesus puts them to the test with his statement question. Uh-oh, look at Jesus. Without Jesus making a call on the situation, he directed them. If any of them were innocent, then perform the office of executioner. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. It is written.
It is written. Y'all over here giving me what is written. This was said evidently well knowing their guilt. Jesus knew them. You didn't bring Jesus no surprise with this woman. And he knew you. He knowing the guilt, their guilt, and well knowing that no one would dare to do it because they had their own faults. So what does Jesus do? Jesus goes back to doing what he was previously doing. And they silent now. They don't know what to say at this time because Jesus had confounded them. You want to use the law of Moses? Well, watch my Savior show you what the law of Moses says. Because that's what he used on you. And they really are silent because Jesus had just busted their trap wide open. And understand that he did not make a judgment call. He just simply said that if you have not done a sin, because adultery is not the only sin, then understand that you have to be her executioner. Oh, Where is your witness? Where are your witnesses? Where are your witnesses without sin? You better look at John 3:16, brother. Or maybe go to Romans 3 and 22 through 24. Anybody want to read Romans 3, 22 and 24?
Romans 3 and what now?
22 through 24.
Okay. Romans 3 says, even the righteousness of God, which is by faith of Jesus Christ, unto all and upon all them that believe it. For there is no difference. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Keep going.
Oh, good. Being justified freely by his grace through the redemption that is in Christ Jesus.
Uh-oh. So let me get this straight. So you sinners brought me a sinner to tell me about that sinner.
All right.
But you didn't tell me about your sins. And since all of us have sinned, all of you have sinned, the only one that ain't sinned is the one you brought her to. And he ain't passed judgment, although he has the authority to. You sinning by putting your butt in a chair it don't fit in. See, they were found at a loss because they could not bring forth even a sinless witness. And the only one that they could have brought forth that would have been a sinless witness is the one you brought her to, and he didn't see nor did he care. Because he was going to show her mercy that you never extended to her. Matter of fact, he was so unimpressed with your show that he was right in the dirt and confounding you. So, again, in verse 8, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And Jesus stooped back down as to say, in my mind, the ball is back in your court, brothers. Y'all want to play this game? I'm good. You see what I'm doing, brothers? I'm down in the dirt writing again. And it is not judging the woman. There's no need to judge the woman. Because the ones that brought me to her, you may not have been doing the adultery part, but you've been doing something. See, the attention is still leaving the woman, and Jesus leaving room for the men to ponder their actions and their own thoughts. Because, see, we like to get focused on other people's faults and transgressions, and we don't focus on our own. Hey, I can't compete with somebody else. I can compete with Jeffrey from yesterday because I'm Jeffrey today. But I can't compete with nobody else. So in verse 9 it says that those who heard began to go away one at a time. The older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. So someone must have caught the message that Jesus had put out. And I can tell you who it was, because it said, those who heard. So they must have heard it. They began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with a woman still standing. See, Jesus had put it out because they started to go away. They got the message. They understood what Jesus was saying. So the crowd heard the message and said that I must have done some sin myself. So why would I stay here and be a witness to this? They heard the hidden message that Jesus truly puts out there. Remember we spoke on the plank and sawdust. Well, here is a prime example of plank and sawdust. These men had so much sawdust in their own eyes that it truly formed a plank. And they couldn't see nothing but the woman's fault, but they couldn't see their own. See, the woman was still standing there. There must have been a purpose for her still standing there. And the woman that was still standing there was not kneeling now. Her positioning had changed. See, the woman is now standing here, and if you remember, Jesus came down to meet her, so maybe there is some confidence in this woman and what she is hearing, and maybe she is experiencing forgiveness, and after being low has been lifted up. You know, Jesus can lift you up just by word. Try him sometime. He'll lift your spirits up. And she needed it because you brought her as a show, as an exhibition to a crowd where teaching was going on in the word, and you interfered and announced her. But Jesus said, nah, I still got a lesson in this. And make sure that you understand that Jesus does not condone sin, but he does forgive it. So in verse 10, Jesus straightened up and asked her. Look at this, the only one to talk to the woman. Jesus straightened up and he asked her, gave her a chance to participate in the conversation, not dragged down there, not accused, not thrown in front of people, but Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? You mean the accusers left? I'm going to tell you something. Satan left Jesus alone in the wilderness when he spoke the truth. Maybe these accusers heard too much of the truth. Maybe they heard about themselves. Maybe Jesus right in the dirt confounded them and confused them. Maybe that foolish thing of God confounded and confused the wise of the world. Said, and Jesus, the accusers left, and Jesus asked, where are they? And then he says, as if he did not know, that no one condemned her. They couldn't. How's a filthy rag going to condemn a filthy rag? But the reality of it is the truth set this woman free. And Jesus was speaking the truth even from the law. You holders of the law. Jesus spoke a truth that drove the men away, which drove away the desire to stone the woman. See, they could not stand in the face of truth. This is not what they were looking for. This was not the food they were trying to digest. They were looking for this woman to be stoned and for Jesus to be caught up in a situation. And Jesus said, I got this. None of them were blameless. None of them. And adultery was not the only sin. And to this day, it is not the only sin. And they had performed numerous sins just trying to set this up. So when you get verse 11, it says, look at who's talking now. Look who's talking. The woman said, no one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you. Jesus declared, go now and leave your life of sin. See, here's another passage that shows you that Jesus came to serve, because he could have condemned her. But look at how he ends it. Go now and leave your life of sin. There's a forgiveness there. There's a telling to leave it alone.
That's it.
He even states that he will not condemn her, and there was no condemnation. And the fact that she was released tells you that her actions were forgiving and not condemning, not punished, not to show the law, but to show the Lord's great mercy and desire for all of us to become more. Once we have spoken to Jesus and once we have believed, we are released from our sin. As he stated, go now in your life of sin. See, Jesus knew that she sinned. That was not the problem. It was never the problem. But as I stated, he doesn't approve the sin, but he does forgive it. You brought her as a spectacle, and Jesus said, I'll still forgive her.
All right.
Anybody want to read Hebrews 8 and 12? Y'all got it?
Okay, Hebrew what now?
8 and 12.
What's the name? Hebrews 8 and 12. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more.
He forgives sins, y'all.
All right.
He forgives sins. Now, just to let you know, if you remember, the title of the message was Jesus Prevents 2 Stonings. So here's the first stoning prevented, because they would have stoned this woman. They were hoping, Jesus said, to stone this woman. But Jesus ain't going to wish harm or do harm to us. That is not who our God is. But we will do harm to one another. And if he ain't doing it to us, why are we doing it to us?
All right.
So as we jump down in the chapter, we get to verse 56, and it says, your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. This is Jesus speaking. And Abraham rejoiced because he could know and perceive and hang on to the divine name of Jesus Christ. And Jesus is simply stating that, one, I'm greater than Abraham, and that Abraham desired the day to see me or him. The Messiah would come from Abraham's lineage, his family. Anybody want to pull up Galatians 3 and 16? Chapter 3, verse 16.
3 and 16.
Yes.
Galatians 3 and 16.
Now to Abraham and his seed was a promise made. He said not, and to the seed as of many, but as of one, and to that seed which is Christ.
Which is Christ. So Abraham, or as Jesus talks, he speaks of Abraham here, and Abraham knew that Christ would be able to see, but don't be fooled. Abraham wanted to see him too. He truly desired when the Messiah would be here in human form, and understand that Abraham did see him. If you look at Genesis 18, 1 through 3, it said, the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre, while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Remember, if you remember, who named the child? If you remember, who named the child told Sarah everything. That's why his name means to laugh. See, Abraham had seen him. He spoke of seeing him, and he also wanted to see him as the Messiah. So, just to let you know, Christ was in the Old Testament. So in verse 57 it says, you are not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham? Here comes the understanding. And if you look at it, Jesus is placing them into understanding who he is. Of course he has, and you can see it in the passage that we just read. But if you look at Genesis 18, 16 through 17, anybody want to read that? Genesis 18, 16 through 17? Genesis 18, verses 16 through 17.
Genesis 18, verse 16.
Through 17. Yep.
I read that you don't mind, okay. And the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham the things which I do? Shall I hide from Abraham the things that I do?
See, they looked at Jesus' age. They saw the physical of Jesus as to not know his power and truth of who he is. If y'all read John 1 and 1, you'll know what I'm talking about, and we're going to hit it in a minute. Jesus has seen them all, and he had seen Moses, Elijah, Abraham. He had seen them all. But what he is saying, like he says in John 1 and 1, I was here before all of them. I know this may confuse you, but I was here before all of them, even when they said that he would be David's Lord. If you remember, he was coming from the line of David and he would be David's Lord. But coming from the seed of David, it truly directs you to his deity and his power. See, they looking at Jesus in the physical. They see a man that is not aged even to 50. But they don't know him like they should just yet. So in 58 he says, very truly I tell you, Jesus answered. Jesus is talking. Before Abraham was born, I am. And I can tell you to go in the book of Exodus. I can tell you to go in the book of Deuteronomy. I am the great I am. You will see it all over the place. That's his title. But when you go back to John 1, 1 and 2, it says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was, say that again, sister, and the Word was with God. and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. See, when it says beginning, if you read the rest of the verse, that passage, it ain't even got to the created part yet, because it tells you everything was created. And see, the creation couldn't be if he wasn't here.
Right.
So if you ask me, did I see Abraham? Yep. Did I see Moses? Yep. Did I see Elijah? Yep. David, Paul, Sarah, I saw them all. I saw my mother. So this is just plain and simple to Jesus, but they don't know. And now here we go again, offending folks because they don't believe. So in the next verse it says, at this, you know how we get. They picked up stones to stone him. But Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. See, they did not believe and remember that Jesus was teaching. And then they wanted to kill him for what he had stated. But he had never lied. But the funny thing is, Jesus didn't escape because he was afraid or scared. That's not why he left. It was not his time. See, his father had already told him of a time, and this was not it. He told him how he would die, and this is not it. He was not dying from being stoned. And the Lord had a time for Jesus, and an escape from the stoning was provided. So now when you look at Jesus prevents 2 stonings, he prevents one for the woman and one for himself. Amen.
All right.
The floor is wide open.
This was a very good lesson, good learning, and very eye-opening.
Amen. Amen.
Be careful when you put your mouth on.
Ha ha.
Be careful how you pass your judgment. Even David had an issue when Nathan came in and told him about the rich man and the poor man with the sheep. And David passed judgment on the rich man, and found out it was him. So judge you not that you be judged, but the measurement you judge shall be judged back unto you. Enjoy the message. Enjoy the lesson.
Amen.
Very good message. It let us know that whatever you do, you can, if you believe and trust in the Lord and go to him and ask him, he will, relieve you from your sin. I don't know if if you ask him to forgive you, you just can't, I don't think you can just keep going back and asking him for the same thing. But this was good because in here, they wanted to bring the lady and put her out, but they didn't bring the man out. And I remember as a child, not as a child, but as a teenager, my grandmother used to always tell us stuff. She said, when you get married, do what a lady is supposed to do. Be a lady. Act like a lady at all times. She said, because if your husband go out there and mess around with other women, they gonna say, oh, he's just being a man. But if you step out there just one time, you will have that name and it will follow you for the rest of your life.
Right.
And she used to always tell us, if you got a husband and he run in the street, if he loves you and you love him, stay at home. Do what a lady's supposed to do. Take care of your husband the way you should take care of him. Because in due time, he'll come home. And don't go out there and try to do what he did. Despite, I'm going to do it because he did. Because They ain't gonna do nothing to say he's just a man. But that name, you're gonna wear it for the rest of your life. Right? And this is really a good lesson. It lets you know that God don't just judge the man. If the woman is wrong, both of them should be judged. But in this case, he told her to go and sin no more. Because the people that brought her there, they see that they had just as much sin as she did. They had the mote in their eyes, so they were just as bad as she was, so they just walked away and left her standing there with Jesus.
Maybe they should have stayed there and stood with Jesus too.
They should have been there. Maybe he, they asked for forgiveness of their sins.
Amen, amen.
Yeah, that's possible there too. Doing stuff they had no business with her. You don't tell them. We don't really know.
Again, Brother Loud, if you look in verse 9, it says that the men who left were also the only witness. Okay? At this crime. The men who left, they were the only witness to his crime. Now, and we know without witness, no one was left in the crowd.
That's right.
Who was able to indict the funny.
And remember, in order to be a witness, you had to be a witness with no fault.
All right.
And guess what they had? They had a whole bunch of them.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it. See what it is? Yeah. And, it's going on today.
It's going on today. I'm going to tell you what my grandmother used to say, and excuse me for using the words. A man is a hoe, just like a woman can be a hoe, as she used to say. And you can set a double standard if you want to, but I can show you in the Bible where the Lord said, if you in the kingdom, ain't no difference. So if a woman is doing a sin and a man is out there doing that same thing or vice versa, it's the same sin.
Yes, it is. It's a good thing they ain't throwing rocks now. A lot of folks have a lot of knocks on their head.
Woo, girl, woo, hush your mouth. I might have to duck down myself. Might see a boulder coming my way.
But I like Hebrews 9 and 12. Let you know he will remember your sins no more.
Yes.
All right? I like that. He will remember them no more.
So you brought me to the so-called judge, and guess what he did? He said, I forgive you. He told me don't go back to it, but he said, I forgive you. Man will judge you and condemn you in the blink of an eye.
Are they good with that?
We good with that. But Jesus said, that's the problem. You ain't me. So when you trying to be me, as they were, he says, I'll show you who I am, and I'll make it so simple that will even confuse you, as I wrote in the dirt.
Because you can always see somebody else, but we can't see ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to say this now. But anyway, some years ago, I've heard people saying if a young lady got pregnant in the church, you would have to go before.
Yeah, I remember that ridiculous thing.
And a lot of times they would put you out of the church.
Yeah, if you hold the office, you can have that.
A lot of people, I know some people will put out excuses, but see, when you think about it, who isn't able to put anybody out? We all sin. That's coming short of the glory of God.
And you got to ask yourself the question. The fault happened. The forgiveness is by God. And you going to tell her she can't belong to the body of God? Or and you never saw the dude. I can remember this when I was young. I see the girls come in and they shame them. And then I'd be like, well, where the dude at?
Yeah.
Where the dude didn't get shamed. Dude didn't get kicked out. Dude didn't have to stop doing what he was doing. See, that's one of the bad parts of us. Because, see, the girl shows, the dude does not. And we can see her so-called sin for however long she carries a child, and then the child is in her arms, and then the child is on her hand. But if the dude don't want to be, the dude don't have to be.
You don't have to be in it.
So maybe we should stop judging them and start loving them.
That's what I told you. They shouldn't have bought them.
You know y'all milling, don't you? Y'all milling. Y'all messing up everything.
Yeah. Well, you know I don't like tradition anyway.
Y'all messing up everything. Who can break the seal? Who can break this seal? They searched all over, couldn't find anyone to break the seal.
Not a one.
Not one. Well, y'all done messed me up. I gotta go do something else now.
Sister Freeman, you still on here?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to wish you a happy birthday today.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Patina.
Oh, who's that? You got one coming up Sunday.
Yeah, we got you. We got y'all.
You got one Sunday.